and welcome to another Unity 5 tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to pause your game, and at the same time we'll create a pop-up panel that comes up when you pause the game, and then you can close it to put the game into unpause. Is that what you call it? Not paused. Alright, so to begin with, I've got a plane in this scene and I've just added a dirt texture onto it. And that's pretty much all. I'm going to add some character controller in a moment, but just for now we're going to add in a particle system. So let's go into game object and particle system, and this will give us a default particle system, and we're not going to play around with it. We just want something that's running and moving so that we can see that the game is paused. The next thing we need is a button to click on to pause the game. So we will create a UI button in the hierarchy. So we'll go button. Now you'll notice this automatically creates a canvas for us and an event system. So the event system takes care of all of the inputs that for clicking and whatever on the canvas. So you don't have to do anything with that. You don't really have to do anything with the canvas. It's the button we're interested in. Now you'll see the button is positioned down this bottom corner here in the game view. To see where it is in your 2D view, if we click on the 2D up here and then zoom out and just move around a bit. Okay, so this outside bit is your entire screen, which is this bit here, and the button is now down this bottom corner, which is probably okay for a pause button. So let's just leave it there, and we'll go to the text element of that button and rename it to pause. Oops. Okay, so now it's pause. Now to click on that button, we need to create code that will run our pause. So I'm going to create a new game object, an empty one, and we'll call this our pause manager. And now we'll create some code. So go create C# and call it pause. And that script we will drag and attach to our pause manager. Now you'll see why I've made this a separate thing later on rather than attaching stuff to buttons and that, because when you pause a game, a lot of things need to happen. So let's just begin by pausing the particle system. So this is our pause script, and I'm going to create a function which will be public. So we have to make it public so it can be seen outside of this script so that we can get our button to call it. And we'll call this function pause game. I've got the void. Let's put a void in here. And then inside our brackets, we're going to stop the game with timescale equals 0. So when the game is normally running at normal speed, timescale is actually set to 1. So if you set it to 0, it's going to stop timed events from happening. Right, so let's just save that, and we'll go back to Unity and just check that we've got that attached to our pause manager. Okay, so we can see our pause script there. Now if you click back on the button, what we can do at the bottom of this button is a on click. So this list here is of the functions that are going to be fired when you click on the button. So we can add the pause manager by click on this plus here to add an event. We'll grab our pause manager and drop that into the object. And then we can look through the functions that are on that pause manager. Let me just move these across so that you can see them. So there's the pause script that's attached to the pause manager. And then if you look through here, you'll find your pause game function. And selecting that will then cause the button to fire that event. So let's run it and try it out. Okay, so particle system's working. We click on pause and time stops, which is what we want. And you can see that the particle system has stopped. Now, we can't select this again to turn it back on because it's only pausing. Usually when you pause in a game, you get a little screen that pops up, which, I don't know, gives you game options or something, and then another button where you can unpause it. So let's create that. So I turn this off. Okay, now I'm going to, under the canvas, create another panel. So let's go to UE and panel, not another panel, a panel. And let's resize that down. And we want that to end up in the middle of the screen. So this will pop up when we pause. Okay, let's just, with that panel selected, I'm going to select the rect transform and make sure that it's actually in the center. So we select the center and then Alt select the center to also set its pivot point and its position to smack bang in the center of the screen. Then if your screen changes size, you'll see because of those pivot points and that it will stay in the center. We didn't do that for the button. You can see that it will actually move. You could anchor that down to that bottom corner. And why don't we do that right now? So I'll just select that button and go into this here, and we go click on that and then Alt click on that to put it down into that corner. And when you change the size of your game, you'll see it stays locked down into that bottom corner. Right, so this is our pause panel, so I'll just call it pause panel. Like that. And the pause panel is going to have a little button on it for unpausing, or we'll just put a close on there. So with the pause panel selected, we're going to go UE button. That will create a new button that is a child of this panel, so that when this panel is disappears, that button disappears as well, which means we don't have to control the button as well as the panel. So let's just move this button down there, and the text on it will be close, like that. Right, so we now have our panel, and initially the game won't be paused, so we're going to set it to be in the disabled right at the beginning and then turn it on later on with our code. So let's go back to our pause script. To turn that panel on when we pause the game, we need to have access to the panel. So I'm going to create an exposed variable at the top, the panel. And then at the same time we pause the game in this script, we will go the panel dot set active is true. And what set active will do is to activate all of the child objects that belong to the panel. So let's save that, go back to Unity, and if we find where we've attached that script to the pause manager, you'll see that the panel is exposed. So we can grab our pause panel and put it into there so that the code will now control it. Right, let's run and click on pause, and the game pauses and this comes up. Now close is currently not linked to anything. So to fix that, we're going to write another function, which is our unpause function. So go back into our panel code, and we'll create another function, which is basically going to be a copy of this one. Again, you want it to be public so that it can be accessed by a button click. And let's call it unpause. Timescale will go back to 1. And the panel set active will become false. Like that. Right, so save that. Then let's go over to the button that is attached to our pause panel. And we can add the click event for the pause manager. So drag the pause manager down into there, and then find the function pause, and then look through your list and you should have unpause in there as well, which will come up. Right, so now if we run it, We can pause the game. See, the particle system stops. Our panels come up. We can go close and it will go away. All right, so we've been able to stop our particle system, but just because some parts of the game stop when we do a timescale equals 0 doesn't mean that all of the different elements that you've got in your game are going to stop. And you might have a lot of scripted things that happen every update that are going to keep playing. So let me just show you an example of when that will happen and how to deal with it. First, we're going to add in a first-person controller character into here. Now, I've already imported the character package, which you'll find under Assets, Import Package, Characters. In there, there's a first-person controller, which I've used in other tutorials. I'm just going to drag that into the scene and then move it up. Now, this has all of the code on it for looking around and moving your camera and your character and all that. So if we just play with that in there. Now, notice in the scene that my character is moving around, but nothing seems to be happening over in the game view. Another little hint also is that when you first play, I'll just show you this in Unity, in the editor, what happens is that I've lost my mouse cursor. If you hit the escape key, you'll get your mouse cursor back. Okay, so let's just stop playing that. And the reason that you've got a different view here to what your player is because you've got this main camera that we had from the start. And the FPS controller also has a camera. So we don't need the main camera anymore. And you can just select and delete that. And this here, the first person character that's a child of the FPS controller, has a camera. And we're not changing any of the settings for that. So let's run it. And you'll now see in your scene that you can look around and move around. All right, so if I hit escape to get my cursor back so I can pause, when I pause, you'll notice that the particle system has stopped moving because of our timescale, but our character can still look around. And I'm using the arrow keys at the moment, so they're not working, okay? So they must be set to be time dependent, but this mouse look thing's still happening. So we need to find what is causing that mouse look to occur and turn it off in the script. Okay, so while this is still running, I'll just grab my cursor again. I'll go over to the first person controller and have a look what's attached to it. So you've got this character controller script and a first person script, and there's a rigid body and audio source. Now, the rigid body will stop with the timescale equals 0. So if you happen to be falling, you will stop falling. And so we don't have to worry about that. We're really only worried about any scripts that are attached. Let's just turn off, while it's still playing, the character controller and go back into here. You'll notice that obviously that character controller is not controlling the mouse look that's happening here. Okay, so that's not the script that we need to worry about. Turn that back on. Let's try this first person controller script. Let's go back into the game. Click to make sure that it's active, and you can see there moving the mouse and nothing is happening. Okay, so we can be pretty sure that if we turn off this script with our pause, we're going to pause the movement of our character. Okay, so let's stop running and deal with that. So open up the pause script, and because the pause script needs to access the scripts that are attached to your player, it needs to know about your player. So we need an exposed variable in here. Let's call it public game object player. Save that code, then switch back into Unity editor. Select the pause manager and look for your exposed player. And that's where you're going to drag and drop your FPS controller in here so that the script can now access stuff that's attached to there. Let's go back to pause. So the way to do this is we first need to grab hold of our script. The script we wanted was our first person controller, our first person input. Now you need to have the name exactly the same. So let's just go back here and select this. So The script that we're turning off is called first person controller. It won't have any spaces when we type it in. Okay, Unity automatically puts a little space in here for us so that we can read it, but it'll be first person controller with these 3 capitals at the beginning. This script in brackets is superfluous. We don't need that either. If you want to see the name of a particular script, then you can actually open that up and you'll see the exact name written here, or you can open the script itself and it'll have it as the class name. So remembering that, first person controller. Go back to our pause script. So in here, first person controller, and let's call it FPC equals player dot get component, and then first person controller brackets like that. So this FPC will have hold of this component. Then we go first person control FPC dot enabled equals false, and that will turn that script off. And this will work for any script that's attached to any game object if you do it the same way. So its name is at the beginning, its name is also inside these brackets to get hold of it, put it into a variable, and then you can turn it on and off with enabled. In this case, we're turning it off to false. While we're here, we might as well turn it back on again. So we'll just copy this code, put it down in the unpause, and instead of setting it to false, we'll set it to true. And let's just save that. Go back into Unity. Now you'll notice there's an error that we're getting here. It says the type or namespace name first person controller could not be found. If we have a look in the project under scripts and look down through our list of scripts, you'll find that there is in fact first person controller. It's just that the script that we've written can't find it, and it's giving us this namespace error. So let's just have a look inside the first person controller code. Anything that comes with the Unity engine that you start to play around with their scripts is likely to be inside some kind of namespace. So it's like a little package that you put around a class. So if you've been following my coding tutorials or any of my other tutorials, we just put a class at the top and that's it, and we don't go for all this other stuff around it. Quite simply, this kind of packages code classes up into the same sort of library. It's not really a library, it's called a namespace. You can see it's called namespace here. But we're getting the error because this class of first person controller is actually inside a namespace. So we need to tell our code that this is inside a namespace. And we can do that by grabbing hold of the namespace itself and just go back to the pause code, and we're going to put that up the top and put using in front of it and a semicolon on the end. So it will now use this namespace for accessing the first person controller. And if we save that and go back to Unity, it should recompile our code and our errors will go away. So you will probably come across that error if you start turning on and off other scripts that come with the packaged objects. Right, so what are we doing? We're testing this. Let's play. All right, so everything's working as it was. Particles are working, and we'll hit the escape key to grab hold of the mouse. Click on pause. Now, there's an immediate problem we've got here, is that I've got no mouse cursor to click on that close button. Even if you hit the escape key, it's not going to grab it. The issue is that the first person controller code, the one that we've just disabled, this first person controller script here, actually turns the mouse on and off. And when we get rid of it, the mouse is in a sort of permanent invisible lock state, which we need to turn on with our code. So you're quickly discovering how all of these little things sort of build up, and the issues that you will find as you try and start to do things like pausing your game. And it's nothing to be afraid of, because this will happen. It's just knowing where to go and look to turn things on and off and figuring out what it is. And that just takes a lot of practice. So that's why I've left all of the issues that you're going to encounter in this actual video. So let's go into the pause code, and we're going to just add some code in here. So after we've turned off that first person controller, which seems to have locked our mouse, I'm going to add this code, which is new, and it's cursor.lockState. You may actually need the latest version of Unity to use this, which is 5.4 that I'm using now, and I updated that yesterday. So we turn on the lock state. Sorry, we'd actually turn it off. So .lock state, cursor lock mode is none, and then we make the mouse cursor visible as well. This will give you back control of the mouse that was taken away by the first person controller script. Now, you don't need to do anything with these when you unpause the game, because the first person controller script gets turned on again and takes back control of that mouse. But just know that at any point, if you lose your mouse cursor and you want to get it back, then it's going to be around lines of code that look like this. All right, so let's save that, switch back to here, press play, and okay, we're back. Particles are working, we can move around. Okay, hit the escape key now to get hold of our mouse. Go down to pause, click on that, and you'll see that the mouse is still there, which is great. Close, and we're back, and everything is working again. Okay, that's great. Now, one more thing I want to show you. If I run this again and we pause, we've got this window come up, but our pause button is still on the screen and it's still clickable, as you can see there. So it's still running pause because that's all it's doing. But if you had other buttons on the screen that did other things, they would still activate as well. Now, you could go around and disable all of those buttons, or what you can do is stick another panel, an invisible panel, over the top of the entire screen underneath this little panel here. That will stop you from clicking through it to click on these items. So just make your pause panel enabled again by turning it on. What we're going to do is stretch the panel itself to fill the entire screen. So select it, then select this little square in the transform, and we want to stretch it in both directions to fill the entire screen. So this is this one down here. So select that and then Alt select it, and that will then make sure that that panel always stretches to the entire screen. Okay, now you can then set the color of that and the image to whatever you like. In this case, you can see that the alpha for it, how transparent it is sort of set quite low. You could change that by moving this up if you wanted to blank out everything that was behind it, or if you might want a bit of a blur effect or something like that. Just shows that everything underneath it will be have this sort of milky film over the top of it, so it will look like it's been disabled. Now you can then add another panel in here. Let's create UE panel that will sit behind the button. Now to move things around in the UE, you actually have to drag them. So I'm just going to drag it up here above the button, which means that the button will be on top of that panel. Now that panel itself, we want to just come out a bit bigger and make it a little bit smaller in here, and then also set it to be in the center, and Alt into the center so it's like that. You can at this point also child that button onto that panel. It wouldn't really make a lot of difference, I don't think, at this point, because everything is underneath the pause panel, which is the one that's going to be turned on or off. This panel here, you might just want to change its color a bit like that. so you can tell it's different. And that's pretty much all you have to do. So let's just run that. Oh, and first, before we play it, we should disable it. Okay, because the whole pause panel needs to be disabled at the beginning of the game. Okay, so run, and there's our particle system. Let's pause, and this has come up. Can't get to our pause button. Won't be able to get to anything else that's going on underneath that transparent, but if we hit close, we're back in the game again. So that panel is a really nice way of fudging, turning off all of those buttons, which you could do manually if you wanted to. You have to do what we've done with this panel, is actually making them inactive, but it's easier just to hide them behind something else. All right, so that's the end of this tutorial, and I hope that helped you with being able to pause your game. So it's not a simple calling a pause function, which would be nice. It's a whole bunch of steps, making sure that things have been turned off, and then making sure that you turn them all back on again.